Welcome to Daily Dose of Knowledge. Your mind is not broken, but it is doing something right now that is quietly destroying your focus, your peace, and your ability to move forward. Stay with us and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. Overthinking is not a personality trait. It is not who you are. It is a pattern, and like every pattern, it has a mechanism and a way out, but most advice about overthinking is useless. Breathe deeply. Think positive. Just stop worrying. If that worked, you would not be here. This video is not that. This is what actually happens inside the brain when you overthink, and what science says actually stops it. Let's start with what overthinking actually is, because most people misdefine it. Overthinking is not thinking too much. It is thinking in circles. The same thoughts returning without resolution. The mind running without moving forward. Psychologists call it rumination. And it is one of the most well-documented predictors of anxiety, depression, and decision paralysis in clinical research. The overthinker is not thinking harder than everyone else. They are stuck in a loop that produces no output, energy spent, nothing built. Now let's talk about what is happening in the brain. The default mode network is a system of brain regions that activates when you are not focused on an external task. It is sometimes called the mind-wandering network. In a healthy brain, the default mode network produces creative thinking, self-reflection, and future planning. It is supposed to be useful. In the overthinker, it hijacks. The default mode network runs on a loop, recycling unresolved thoughts, replaying past events, and simulating worst-case futures on repeat. The brain cannot tell the difference between a real threat and a vividly imagined one. Every simulated catastrophe produces a real stress response, real cortisol, real elevated heart rate, real physical wear on the body. You are not just thinking about a problem. You are physically experiencing it over and over without ever solving it. Now let's talk about why the brain does this, because it is not a malfunction. It is a misfired survival mechanism. The brain's primary job is threat detection. For most of human history, that meant physical threats, predators, enemies, starvation. The brain solved those threats through repetitive mental simulation, running the scenario again and again until a solution emerged or the threat passed. That mechanism still runs. But the threats have changed. Social judgment, career failure, relationship uncertainty, financial anxiety. These threats have no clean resolution moment. They cannot be outrun or fought. They just persist. And the brain keeps simulating them, because it was built to simulate until the threat is gone. Overthinking is the ancient threat detection system running on modern problems it was never designed to solve. Now let's talk about the first real method and why it works neurologically. The single most evidence-backed intervention for rumination is behavioral activation. Moving the body. When you engage in physical movement, walking, exercise, even pacing, the prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function and worry, partially hands over neural resources to the motor system. The brain cannot fully maintain the rumination loop and coordinate complex physical movements simultaneously. The loop loses processing power. This is not motivation advice. It is neuroscience. Movement literally competes with overthinking for the same neural bandwidth. A 2021 study published in the journal Behavior, Research and Therapy confirmed that even a single bout of moderate exercise significantly reduced rumination scores in clinical participants. You do not need to want to move. You need to move. The wanting comes after. Now let's talk about the second method, cognitive diffusion. Cognitive diffusion comes from acceptance and commitment therapy. It is one of the most clinically validated approaches to breaking the overthinking loop. The core insight is this: you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are events passing through your mind. They are not instructions. They are not facts. They are not you. Most overthinkers relate to their thoughts as reality. The thought arrives, and they are inside it immediately. Fully merged with it, living it, cognitive diffusion creates distance. Instead of thinking, I am going to fail, you observe, I am having the thought that I am going to fail. That shift sounds small. Neurologically, it is significant. Labeling a thought as a thought activates the prefrontal cortex and reduces amygdala activation. The emotional intensity drops measurably. You are no longer inside the thought. You are watching it. And what you can watch, you can let pass. Now let's talk about the third method. And it is the one most people resist. Scheduled worry time. It sounds absurd, but the clinical evidence behind it is substantial. The technique comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. You designate a specific window, 15 to 30 minutes, as your official worry time. When an intrusive thought arrives outside that window, you acknowledge it and deliberately defer it. What this does neurologically is interrupt the on-demand nature of the rumination loop. The brain learns that the thought does not need to be processed immediately. The urgency signal weakens. Research from Penn State University showed that participants who used scheduled worry time reported significantly lower anxiety and reduced intrusive thought frequency within 2 weeks. You are not suppressing the thought. Suppression backfires. It amplifies. You are postponing it on your own terms. And most of the time, when the worry window arrives, the thought no longer feels urgent. The brain needed permission to let it go. Scheduled worry time gives it that permission. Now let's talk about the role of uncertainty, because underneath most overthinking is one specific thing. Intolerance of uncertainty. The inability to tolerate not knowing the outcome. Research by Michelle Dugas at Concordia University identified intolerance of uncertainty as the core driver of generalized anxiety and chronic overthinking. More than the content of the thoughts, more than the specific fears. The overthinker is not afraid of the worst case specifically. They are afraid of not knowing which case will happen. The brain tries to resolve uncertainty through more thinking. But uncertainty cannot be thought away. More simulation does not produce certainty. It produces more simulation. The intervention is not to find certainty. It is to build tolerance for not having it. This is done through gradual exposure to low-stakes, uncertain situations. Making a decision without researching it to death. Sending the message without rereading it 5 times. Letting an outcome arrive without pre-simulating every version of it. Each small act of tolerating uncertainty trains the brain that ambiguity is survivable. The loop weakens because the trigger weakens. Now let's talk about the fourth method, the one that works at the physiological level. Extended exhale breathing. Not deep breathing generally, specifically extending the exhale longer than the inhale. The vagus nerve connects the brain to the body and plays a central role in regulating the stress response. Slow extended exhales directly stimulate the vagus nerve, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's brake pedal. Inhale for 4 counts. Exhale for 6 to 8 counts. The ratio matters more than the speed. Within 90 seconds, this technique measurably lowers heart rate, reduces cortisol signaling, and decreases activity in the amygdala, the brain's alarm center. You are not calming your mind by thinking differently. You are changing the physiological state the mind is operating in. A calm body sends safety signals to the brain. The threat simulation loses its urgency. This works during the loop, not just as prevention. When the overthinking is active, extended exhale breathing is one of the fastest ways to physically interrupt it. Now let's bring it all together, because the goal is not to silence your mind permanently. A silent mind is not the target. A mind that can think, conclude, and move on is the target. The overthinker's problem is not that they think. It is that they cannot exit the thought. The loop has no off-ramp. Movement creates a competing neural demand. Cognitive diffusion creates distance from the thought. Scheduled worry time removes urgency. Uncertainty tolerance removes the trigger. Extended exhale breathing changes the physiological state. None of these require willpower. None of them require you to feel ready. They work at the level of the nervous system, below the level where the overthinking is happening. You do not think your way out of overthinking. You change the conditions the thinking is happening in, and the loop loses its grip. Here is the final truth, and it matters. Your overthinking mind is not your enemy. It is a protection system that has been given too much work and too little resolution. It needs fewer unresolved loops, not more suppression. Completion, movement, physiological regulation, and tolerance of uncertainty are not coping strategies. They are the actual solution. The mind that overthinks is the same mind that, when given the right conditions, thinks deeply, plans well, and sees things others miss. The problem was never the mind. It was the loop. If that gave you something real to work with, subscribe to Daily Dose of Knowledge. Drop a comment with what triggers your overthinking most. And explore our videos on psychology, human behavior, self-help, society, and history. There is always something here that will shift the way you think.